Hello, welcome back to BodhiBuilding. We're going to talk about the heroine's journey today and talk about some of the distinctions between the hero's journey, coined by Joseph Campbell, and the distinctions between that and the heroine's journey, which is the female experience, the woman's experience, similar to that of the hero's journey, but in modern times. If you get our newsletter, I kind of, spelled that out. Jen wrote a great summary of how I teach others about this. It's important to understand the contrast between the two, especially if you are a woman, you work with women, or you're in a relationship with women. It's a the differences to the hero's journey is that this is a path of transformation. It's laid out initially as a call to adventure. There's the hero's journey is one that can be experienced as more of like an external adventure, whereas the heroine's journey is one of internal integration. So it's all humans, female or male, will encounter this journey either repetitiously, or, as I like in the heroine's journey, it's more of a spiral. And so in the distinctions I talk about here, I'll show this, is the heroine's journey is a cyclical path. It's repeated many times in a woman's life. Whereas the hero's journey, it's marked by a beginning and an end with 3 stages: departure, trials, and return. The hero's journey is about transformation through conquest. He goes out to achieve something, where the heroine's journey is about integration through an evolving process of initiation. The hero's journey peaks by ascension, which is these marked by external victories, whereas the heroine's journey is peaked by descent. She's going inward. She's doing internal reconciliation. So while the hero overcomes these trials to prove himself through action and individuation, the heroine is reclaiming herself by healing the fractures of her feminine and masculine self. And in the hero, he will leave home to seek adventure. The beginning of the heroine's journey is usually marked when she leaves herself to seek validation. And the goal of the hero, again, sort of talked about a little bit above, is self-actualization and through contributing to society. Whereas the goal of the heroine is reconnection with the soul by confronting her emotions and conflicts internally. And so, though there's many similarities, it's important to understand the distinctions. Again, as I said, if you're a woman, you work with women, or you're in a relationship with women. We've got Zach here with us too, to sort of chime in and provide insights too for specific marks along his timeline and his experiences, his life of hero's journey. And he's also in a relationship with a woman who is on her own heroine's journey. And so let's get started. I'll first start with, these are the 3 main stages of the hero's journey, sort of coined by Joseph Campbell. There is the departure. This is the call to adventure. And you'll see that in this, in these 2, that they are defined by color. So whereas the departure, or the call to adventure in the hero's journey, what you see in red, that's similar in the heroine's journey. In the green, there's initiation. This is the road of trials. There's a lot of things that mark characteristics of this stage of the hero's journey. And you'll see also in green, these are the similarities to that in the heroine's journey. And finally, it's the return home. There's resistance to freedom, and then ultimately there's freedom. And that is also marked similarly in the heroine's journey at the final gateway of integration. And so the hero's journey, we could do call to adventure number 1. That's where he's living in this ordinary world. There is a call to adventure when something disrupts this world he's in, and it's inviting the hero to go on this quest. And initially, the hero is going to refuse and resist. There's going to be fear and doubt, this sort of hesitation to the obligation the hero has. This is similar to the separation from the feminine and identification with the masculine. So, again, where the hero is leaving home, being called to leave home, the heroine is leaving herself. And then we've got, the road of trials. This is initiation, all in green, both lists. The green is the initiation. So for the hero, he's got road of trials too. These are tests, challenges, allies, enemies. You're going to see this in the heroine's journey too. The tests and the allies are, as well as the victories to certain challenges, that will be the illusions of fulfillment for the heroine. She's going to think she's on top of the world, and she's getting lots of pats on the back. Wherein the hero's journey during this initiation in the green area, he will meet the goddess, right? An encounter with love. It sort of symbolizes this sense of wholeness, the potentiality of what wholeness looks like, as well as meeting the temptress, the woman as a temptress, or any kind of temptation that obstructs the hero's path or hero's journey, tempting him to stray off the path. These can be similar to in the heroine's journey, where confronting the shadows, reconnecting with her feminine self, and healing that mother-daughter split, such as in the initiation of the hero's journey. In that green area, he will encounter sort of this atonement with the father, confronting authority and power and his relationship to authority and power and that masculine self. And then there's a ultimate for the hero still in that green area, to transform, gain wisdom, be enlightened, to ascend. And that also is marked for the heroine in the journey by healing that masculine, because once the heroine will heal the mother-daughter split, she will be confronted with that masculine part of her that still must be integrated fully. There's a lot of healing that has to be done with the masculine, from leaving herself, from identifying with the masculine. The return home is all about that gained wisdom and bringing that back into the ordinary world. And both the hero and the heroine have to do that. The hero is coming back, the return is coming back the hero, whereas the heroine is coming back the embodied self. And so there's so many similarities throughout the stages of each. There's also very many distinctions to this. And a lot of women can identify with the hero's journey for sure. We're always going on one. Again, the hero's journey is linear. It's this beginning marked by an end. And then we may be faced with yet another, call to adventure. Whereas the heroine's journey is always this cyclical, experience of integrating. And so you'll see that throughout a woman's life. There's always this call to integrate something, call to heal something. There's always going to be a moment in the woman's life where she leaves herself. She abandons herself. She abandons her soul. She forfeits parts of herself in order to fit into society, to fit into groups or organizations or career or family and relationships. And so that's a repetitive and very common challenge that women face, is the abandonment of self. And getting into this, we're going to call in Zach here a little bit, as well as Jen, to see if there are any insights to how they identify with either of these. But in the past 6 decades, as I've said, it's become very clear that women are no longer following the same format of the hero's journey, though we may experience those parallel or simultaneously to our heroine's journey. The woman's journey, again, the past 6 decades, it's all about reclaiming her sexual creative energy and embodying her wisdom and balancing her own, sovereignty with softness, ambition with grace, as we've seen so many feminist waves and movements that sort of drive women more into masculine roles, masculine embodiments, activities, pursuits, ambitions. And you can even see a heroine's journey over the past 6 decades of like a collective, women collectively, as the pendulum has swung so far in one way, and then you'll see some that kind of push them a bit this way, and then it goes back, and that's what the spiral looks like. It's the constant movement of integration, abandoning self, reclaiming self, abandoning self, reclaiming self. And so I've done a course too on BodhiBuilding. I highly recommend it, obviously. Creating change. Zach took creating change, and we talk about the hero's journey a lot. It's important to understanding our own personal life myth. And so, Zach, when you went through some of the things and learning yourself about the hero's journey, how can you give an example of what that departure looks like the call to adventure, leaving home, the resistance of it, meeting the mentor, and then finally crossing that threshold?
Yeah, so I mean, I have my own personal experience, and I have experiences that I've seen with clients and friends and various family members to certain degrees, and it's always very unique to the individual. Like everybody has their own kind of flavor of how it happens for them. But Joseph Campbell did a really good job of kind of collecting those sort of layered experiences and seeing the patterns in them. And in terms of like the departure and the beginning stages of the hero's journey, it for me it happened when I was younger. I was probably a teenager when I started getting this kind of sense that like that life was not what it was cracked up to be. Like there was something more going on than what was uh, in the world around me, and that seems to be the case for pretty much every person I've worked with or every friend that I've had that I've talked to about this. In terms of my perspective, it was a little bit like um, mine came about with depression. So mine came with lots of symptoms, and the symptoms were pretty much as high as the degree of departure that I needed. Some people, it's not a major; they don't get major symptoms. It's just little life changes. But for me, it was like I realized that um, what I was doing with my life wasn't exactly the most fulfilling, and that was causing pain. It was causing these symptoms that were basically little wake up calls to go, hey, like it's you're depressed, but you're depressed because there's something on the other side of that that needs to be acknowledged that just isn't being acknowledged for some reason. And so that awareness was pretty much the call to action for me, which is essentially uh, look into this. Look at what's behind these feelings you're having, and see what's kind of beyond the veil of what you're not seeing, and dive into that and see what's there. And the more that's unraveled, the more it's led to the rest of the hero's journey. And there was a certain stage for me personally where I crossed a threshold where, for me, I think it was probably dropping out of college when I was younger. I went to college for a while. That was the thing I did, and realizing this is not for me, and then that the call to action of going, well, there's something more for you here if you just follow it. And it took a little bit of time. I probably refused to, in some way, to acknowledge it. Um, and then inevitably there was this threshold of, okay, if I leave college, there's really no going back. I mean, you could, but um, once I made that decision to leave college, then it was like, okay, now I'm out in the initiation stage. There's this road of trials of figuring out how to navigate this new world and learn new things. And um, most of the men that I've talked to have a similar experience, and it may not be dropping out of college or reinventing their life. It could be something as simple as um, there's some sort of challenge in their life that makes them realize that there's something more going on. Like I said, it's all unique to each person. Um, and then it,
Yeah, and that's like the first stage of the hero's journey. And so like again, as you guys all can tell, like there's a lot packed into just one stage. There's just so much packed into that. They're got their normal life. Zach's in high school. He's thinking about college, but he's also noticing certain things in the world that are going on that don't seem to match the energy in which he wishes to engage with it. But you know what? He resists. He's like, I'm going to be a good boy. I'm going to go to college anyway. Goes to college. And then it starts to compound even more. Like that energy gets bigger and bigger until he has to reconcile, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm going down the wrong path. And so something pops up, a force, a teacher, a guide, training, something that inspired him to go, that's what it is. That is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm here in college trying to follow this, get a business degree, but you know what? I see this, I'm getting interested in this, and the more I listen to it, read it, learn by it, the more I'm inspired and instigated to go to just leave, to commit to walking past that threshold and go into that unknown world new. And so that is very symbolic to the first death that Zach faced. He had to leave his old self in order to cross that threshold and then be swallowed up by this new world he's walking into. And so that's just stage one of the hero's journey. It's very similar again, where in the heroine's journey, she is separated by the feminine and identifies with the masculine. So through that stage one, similar to the hero, she is recognizing that the feminine spirit within herself, her feminine soul, is in some way, in some means, and again, like Zach said, it's different for everybody, is a weakness, or it is a you know it's a means in which she must abandon in order to fit into society, or to fit into her work or her family, her relationships, her peer groups, school, all of that. And so an example of that would be for me, where I, you know, abandoned my feminine self, or there was the separation of my feminine self, was around puberty. And I think a lot of women, even today, experience this. As we are becoming women, our bodies are changing, our breasts are getting bigger, we've started menstruating, and our voices may change a little bit. We carry ourselves a little differently. And that can be uncomfortable when you're in a educational school setting, culturally, socially, for me, church, where those signs of puberty and coming into myself as a woman, and growing into my sexuality as a woman, as a heterosexual woman, those things were taught to me as, you need to hide that. And those things can be seen as tempting or sinful, or what's the word, vain and prideful, and all those things are bad. And so there was an onset of puberty very quickly, followed up by an onset of shame of my feminine self and the embodiment of that. So I abandoned that. And again, like many, many women and young girls today can share the same story. That's difficult. And so what do? We start identifying with the masculine, and we're playing sports. We're being called tomboys. We dress differently. There's a sense of awkwardness a little bit, but we're really just trying to fit in and be accepted. And the pursuit of fitting in and being accepted can have us being pulled in different ways. Like it's an impossible bind that we are put into, because, on the one hand, there's girls, like for me in high school, like, why do the cheerleaders, why are they okay? Like, I would love to be a cheerleader. I was even on the dance team. And it's just this expression of that feminine self was seen by other girls as something to envy, but yet we were taught that that is slutty, sinful, tempting, vain, full of yourself, selfish, prideful. And so there was like this envy with also a disdain attached to it. And that's very discombobulating for a young developing psyche, going through puberty. So for some girls like me, you just reject it entirely, just totally and entirely reject it, and wear baggy clothes, some flannel shirts, and just get heavy into sports. And for a lot of girls too, like myself, you befriend more boys than female friends, because there's this sense of what if they betray me? What if they judge me? What if they criticize me? What if, I can't trust them? So there's just constant pulling that seems like such an impossible bind, as you're coming into that feminine, where for me, I just abandoned that completely. It was just too much, like just too much to deal with. So I identified more with my masculine self. I also experienced sexual assault, and a year of my high school was very traumatic, and that just compounded this belief, this developing belief that the feminine part of myself actually is a threat to me. It is a threat to my physical safety. It's a threat to my dignity. And so if I could just present myself a little less feminine, I'll be safe. And so that carried over into my 20s. And so that, like the call to adventure, the disruption of the ordinary world, the fear, the doubt of the hero, that is what the heroine is going through. She is abandoning herself. She is separating from the feminine. She is identifying with the masculine, and commits to that. She takes a commitment to just go out and go into this unknown world. And so for me, that was it. It carried over into my 20s, and I took that masculine energy of ambition and direction, concisiveness, decisions, being very surgically precise in my decisions. I was even battling, no surprise, it's ADHD going into college, and just having to manage that, stay off medications, but manage that by just constantly keeping busy. That inflated my masculine identity. And I found myself competing more often with men than women. I even started coaching as a sophomore in college. I started coaching junior high soccer, the boys soccer team. That's where I found myself comfortable. And then after college, started to pursue very masculine endeavors, politics, venture capital, until that's where we enter. I'm at that point already, I'm in the road of trials. I'm encountering a lot of allies who I think are my allies, and a lot of challenges and series of tests that I encounter by the time I get to Washington, D.C. And I think for me, that was the illusion of success. Wow, I am young. I am desired by many firms and politicians to work with them in the legislation. And this is just the boon of my success. Meanwhile, I'm being completely burnt out. And nothing can really bring a woman into the darkness than realizing she can't keep going at that rate. And for me, that was my illness and becoming sick. And I could, so we could keep going on there, but, we're already into that initiation part, the road of trials, the illusions of fulfillment. And, here I am, stage 5, I'm awakening to that void, that spiritual emptiness, because while I've been led to believe and continue to lead myself to believe that all of this illusion was success and I can do it all, when I am now married and working and commuting and I'm getting paid very well, but I can't. I'm using all my vacation days, all my sick days to go to the chiropractor, to get tests done at the gastroenterologist. I'm seeing endocrinologists, and I'm just being referred from one specialist to the next and put on all these medications. And it's spiraling to the point where I don't know if it's the side effects of the medications or if it's a new symptom indicating another, disease. And again, that led all the way into my late 20s. And you have to take into an account of the distinctions of that between men and the hero's journey. Whereas the men, they're encountering the love and the symbology of wholeness. That might be when they have their first serious relationship or when they get married, and they will encounter the temptations that want to lead them astray, whether it's other women or whether it's greed or the temptation for power, the temptation for fame. And whereas for women, we will constantly be tempted to override our own instincts, our own intuition. That is the temptation, because the illusion of fulfillment, the illusion of success gets to that point where we can no longer keep burning ourselves to the ground. And like me, where I was getting sick and repeatedly seeing doctors and taking medications, and these medications were even making me feel worse. There is a denial, or yet I could say a temptation, to override or deny my own intuition that what I'm doing is wrong. And really wanting to remain attached to the former false self that achieved success. And so we want to sort of hang on to that as long as we can. And then I became a mother. And when I became a mother, simultaneously to awakening to this void, I was forced to confront these shadows. And nothing will help a woman reconnect, with her feminine than when she becomes pregnant, when she has the impending transformation of motherhood. And I will say, during this time, a lot of women will skip number 5 and 6. They will skip that in order to be a mother, to become a mother. So when they become a mother, like me, my first trip in the spiral, I was reconnecting with my feminine self for sure. It was a force that I couldn't deny or reject. It was overwhelming. But because I kind of skipped and hurried through number 5 and 6, I experienced that overwhelming reconnecting to the feminine self with shame and guilt, disappointment in myself for wanting to be with my child, for wanting to be nurturing, for wanting to be soft, for wanting to let go of a, high level career and fast paced, successful. There was just guilt, denial, and shame experienced through that. And so guess what happens? That the remnants of me skipping through 5 and 6, I'll revisit that again. Just like every other woman going through the heroine's journey, whatever you skip, whatever you speed through, whatever, it's like a speed bump, in a school zone. You don't see the sign, you're not looking, and you just boop, and you keep going. Well, you're going to come back to that. It's going to confront you again. And it did for me. And so those are all similar with the hero's journey too, whereas the hero, again, the temptation, the meeting of that potential wholeness, the love, reconnecting with the feminine for me was pregnancy and motherhood. For the hero, it would be atonement with the father, confronting his relationship with authority and power, and ambitions and success. For me, it was reconnecting with the feminine by confronting my own story about softness and nurturing and femininity. So, Zach, when you kind of got into that part of the stage, what was it for you? So, what was it for you that was that confronting the authority or power or success that was like, I got to confront my relationship to this?
It's
Uh,
actually a very pinpoint story that I can think of.
Good.
But
Yay.
yeah, so when I left school, so that was kind of my crossing the threshold. Um, I looked at everything that I had left. So I left school and the corporate world and all this direction I was going in, and I not only left it, but I also rejected it. And so for probably several years, I was very anti money, anti corporation, anti like the man is the one that's causing this, right? I blame the man, or blame society or for whatever reason. Um, and I was essentially one of these bliss bunnies. I was doing all the meditation, eating right, doing all these things that were very helpful, but there was a shadow side of it where I rejected everything that I didn't want to be, and oftentimes that was organization, making money, um, things that I associated with the old me. And so very quickly, I had a roommate when I was going through this period, and this roommate has turned out to be quite a successful businessman and probably one of the most masculine guys I've ever met. Still good friends with him to this day. We were living together, and I remember there was like a month or two where I didn't pay rent. I missed it, or I was late on it, or something like that. And I remember he sat there in the living room with me, and I was laying there on the couch. I was doing some kind of some kind of out of body whatever. And he comes in, and he's just like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just relaxing. I don't know, meditating, whatever." And he's like, "Did you miss rent again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I meant to talk to you about that." And he goes, "Dude." And he basically laid into me in a very, very gentle but direct way, and it just snapped me right into the awareness of like, oh shit, like I had this enormous part of me that I'm just not acknowledging, and that's organization, money making, all the things that I rejected about the old me. Those were the things that I needed to look at within myself, and all of those things that I rejected within the old me were um, uh, basically what you said at the beginning is there was the authority of responsibility, and I rejected the responsibility because I associated responsibility with pain, but that's wasn't necessarily the case. And
Like identifying outer authority, confusing that with your own inner authority.
yeah, because my whole life I had been all I did was listen to authority figures, teachers, schools, parents. I just did what everyone else kind of told me was the right thing to do, and when I realized that's not what makes me happy, these people were wrong, I went, oh, they're all wrong. Then I pushed them away and went, they're the problem. They're the reason I was even in this in the first place. Which some truth to that, but it's not the whole truth. It's not. I can't blame them for fully doing it. And that was kind of part of growing up was realizing, you know, there's a valid point on their side, and there's also I need to take responsibility for myself instead of projecting responsibility on other people, especially if I'm not going to listen to what they have to say and follow my own path. I have to take responsibility for that path. And
Right.
so taking responsibility for myself ultimately led me to appreciate what they're responsible for. And yeah, so there was that kind of atonement of what are the things that need to be done in order to do what needs to be done. So like if there's a very Kamala Harris there, but like if I need to accomplish something, I have a dream, a goal, or an objective. There's going to be requirements and responsibilities that are needed in order to meet that goal. And me five, probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years ago would have rejected those responsibilities and just thought they'll just come along and I don't have to do anything to get there. But reality is, okay, if you want to run a business, there's 12 different things you got to do to make that business run. And then as soon as I started, as soon as I started acknowledging those responsibilities, that's when success came my way. And I had to atone with the part of me that didn't want to do those responsibilities.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. And
Yeah.
then that's very father figure esque. It's like it's very much that's very a masculine thing to do. Is It's very pointed and direct and very centered, sort of get shit done kind of energy. Um, that's the stuff that I was pushing away,
Hmm.
and it's still going on. I mean, to this day, I still learn in many ways how I reject authority or reject my masculine side, and over time, I've been able to learn to reintegrate it, and it's made me a better person. And I've just watched myself grow over time with that. So,
Yeah, and that's sort of where I get at too, is like, again, when I'm outlining a lot of the distinctions between the hero journey and the heroine's journey, is that the things that you speed through or don't fully flesh out, which no one really can, you will be revisited by those. You will be confronted by those on your next journey. And so we have one arc, which is our life from birth till death. That one arc in itself is a hero's journey. But our life is also going to be marked by a lot of journeys, beginning, end, beginning, end, beginning, end. It's this birth of self and the death of the old self, rebirth, death of the old self. That's going to happen many times throughout our life. And again, when you speed through things, as I call the heroine's journey, is sort of like a spiral. um, it's all about the integration. If you're not fully integrating, you'll be confronted by it. So my disillusion of success and what it means to be success, and in order to be successful, I have to be driven, ambitious, high energy, and just do, and not so much be. That I was confronted by that once again on when I made it back up to the spiral and had to come back down again. On my way back down, I realized that's the thing I sped through uh, the first time around. So, yeah, that, like you said, like confronting the relationships that you have, and the ideas and your worldview when it comes to authority and power and success, you do revisit, as you said, you revisit that a lot. And that is in our human nature. No one can fully heal all of our shadows and integrate them and be fully healed. I've heard a lot of people in their 20s and even people in their 40s who've said, I don't have any, I've done all the shadow. Like, I don't have any, you know, and it's like, almost like that gif that of that guy who's like takes his glasses off and goes, it's like, that's not even possible. Some
yeah.
of the greatest mentors I had in my life, one who passed away, still at the time, even as he was dying, was learning of new shadows. And yes, he was very stubborn. Like, he wanted total full soul evolution. But even I, someone 40 years younger than him, could see like that in itself is an illusion, that you're going to have a total soul evolution in this one lifetime, to the point that when you reincarnate, you've got nothing to evolve to. That's so anyone who has this illusion that they don't have any shadows to work through or confront or deal with is breathtaking to hear that. But also, I can understand that when you um, embark on, and Jen can attest to this too, when you embark on some of these, like if you're very elementary into entering into sort of the inner work, self development, spiritual development world, um, and not even just elementary. If you've been in it for even a decade, and but your exposure to the different modalities of healing and type of inner work are so limited, you may have end up with this false belief that you're healed. Um, and the easiest way to know whether or not you're healed is if your life just has zero conflict, nothing, none whatsoever. You'd never experience emotions that are heightened or intense, uncomfortable. You don't have any triggers. You don't have any arguments. You don't pass any judgments towards anyone. There aren't ever any moments of confusion in the day or the week or the month. There's never any pause to, am I, you know, should I do this? Should I say that? Is this the right thing to do? Should I pivot my career? No, like literally everything in your life is perfect. Then cool, good for you. Then you've done it. But if that's the case, then what are you doing now? Like, what is life once you've reached that kind of nirvana? And so my point is, we're always going to be on the spiral as women, men and women both too. We're always going to be starting and stopping, being born and experience the death of an old self, whether it's a subtle or a very marked by huge impact events. It's always going to be happening. And then when we, going back to the heroine's journey, Jen, what was it like for you? So when I say like I kind of skipped the first time that I can account for in my mind, looking back, I kind of sped through 5 and 6 of the awakening to the void. I mean, I think I was awakening to it, but I was denying what it really was, and just skipped over the confronting the shadows. When was the first time? You and I share a lot of similarities, but when was the first time where you realized or were reconfronted by that void and revisited by the shadows to the point where you're like, all right, this is something I can't ignore?
I think really early on, I realized that I was, like you said, I was suppressing my feminine side because I was like you. I went into the very highly competitive sports, very structured life, wanted nothing but safety in my life. Like it was always attached to feeling like I was unsafe. So I
And
had to compartmentalize and, sorry.
oh, and I was going to say, and to feel safe, you felt like you had to be your own savior. And you were a
Yeah.
firefighter, right? You were even in firefighting. And you had
Yeah, so I've always taken on kind of like the masculine roles, super, ultra independent, never afraid to kind of throw myself into something and try it out and go, oh, that didn't work. But I had a similar case with Zach too. Like I got a scholarship, I went to school, and I hated it. It made me miserable, and I acted out, and people didn't like me. So that was a hard lesson to learn. But I think as a woman, it's so easy to abandon yourself. Like we're not taught to have that balance of masculine and feminine and look at how that plays out in your life, but I gradually, I don't know that I had, like I said, you're teaching, like it's this kind of like skipping stone of always, learning about yourself. But I did, and similar to you, I got very sick. Your body's just like, nope, this is time. We're forcing you to go inside and actually look at what's going on. And I remember having a conversation with my mom, and she was like, it sounds to me like you are spiritually like missing something. And I was like, that's totally it. Like I was just missing that component of my life of, seeing the bigger picture. It was always just like focusing, the blinders were on, right? Just get through life, get through life, get through life. No. Take the blinders off and look. So, yeah, but I think a lot of women can really relate to that in themselves, that we suppress so much of our feminine side. But I also had that at a younger age, like my, 16-ish, where I was like, I felt very feminine, especially during puberty when your breasts come in and your period. I was always a late bloomer. I didn't get any of that stuff till later on after all my friends. So I always felt like I was kind of behind the curve as well. But I did recognize, even when I was really highly into competitive sports, I liked that, like I liked having the helmet on with the long flowing blonde hair. Like I always hung on to that feminine part of myself that I was trying to bury. Yeah, it's interesting.
That part of your identity, that's something inside you intuitively knew, like, not to let that one go. And
Yeah.
that was always trailing behind you, like it never went away. And you touch on something that's really important too, that I want to go back to, that we have another video all on it, is that the more when women in these stages of awakening to the void and confronting the shadows, a lot of women experience the burnout. I mean, that's so common. I mean, it's all over. There's just an endless amount of information about this. So this is not going to be anything new to viewers or listeners of this. But that is a very pivotal moment in the spiral, in the heroine's journey, is this call to what is going on with your body. And there is nothing more intuitive, and there's nothing more symbolic of your own inner wisdom that is very inherent to the feminine spirit, to the woman, than your body. The body is the vessel of your wisdom. And when it begins to break down, that is a huge sign that you have denied and abandoned the feminine self for so long. The body is now deteriorating. And as we talked about in an earlier video, is that 85% of autoimmune cases are women, and that those rates continue to rise significantly as over the past 60 years. Not only is it 85% of autoimmune cases are women, we now, like, I think it was in the early 1980s, and don't quote me on this, I'm guesstimating based on my recollection, the amount of autoimmune diseases that were known were about 20. And now it's hundreds and hundreds. So as women, moved into more equality, more masculine roles, more of a masculine embodiment, not saying it's wrong. There just wasn't a sociocultural attention or even acknowledgement or respect to the psychology of that and what is going on in terms of that as a symptom of the collective psyche and how it views the two polarities. And the more women's movements took them into independence, success, ambition, and being the directors and the CEOs, women never really stopped being mothers either. But in a society that marks these two polarities and the characteristics of them as masculine is toxic, feminine is weak, and the risk of being weak far outweighs the risk of being toxic for a woman who's really truly trying to make her way in that world. And so there's almost being seen as toxic in many cases throughout at least the last 30 years. That's almost like a badge of honor for women, and a badge of honor for feminists. And this is not a critique on feminists or women at all. I you can include me in that. That was me for sure, 100%. I would rather be the bossy bitch, the the cold, rigid, mean, bitey, scary woman than I would have rather been the soft and nurturing and weak and vulnerable and fractured, less than woman. And so for women, it puts them in this impossible bind to choose between two negatives, the way society has evolved to define what it is to be masculine, what it is to be feminine. And no matter what, you're going to get burned by something or someone and judged and criticized for it. And there's a wonderful quote by Marion Woodman that I shared recently, where she said, the tragedy of modern woman is not that she has like too little to do, but that she has been bound and tied and shackled to 1,000 invisible strings, and many of which, contradict each other, and they strangle one another. And she's born into this web of, expectations, and this web of expectations was spun long before she took her first breath. And it's includes this net of woven ancient archetypes, and as well as modern demands. And these ancient archetypes mixed with these modern demands, they don't know each other and they cannot make peace with each other. And when she writes about that, and I always recommend any woman, any person, period, should read Marion Woodman. She expands on Joseph Campbell's work while applying Jungian theory specifically to the woman's psyche. And it is so fascinating. And anyone, no matter who you are, what you believe, what sex you are, gender, career, season in life, when you read Marion Woodman, you can't disagree with anything she says. She is so artful and articulate and precise in how she puts these things out. It's just all full of compassion and love as well. But that quote by her is so powerful because it expertly describes what women, as modern women, are the place we're put in. It's this being feminine is weak, or you could choose to be masculine, which is toxic or cold. And you could be seen as less than, or you could be seen as too much. Either way, those are the choices internally that the collective female psyche has evolved into. And we are still giving birth to girls today that are being born into that collective psyche. You're either less than or you're too much. And so in the heroine's journey, it's about reconnecting with the feminine self, healing that, while also acknowledging and healing that masculine self, and being able to move through the world in a balance and dance of both in a very authentic way to yourself. And so that's the healing, the mother-daughter split. And when I talk about the mother-daughter split, there are, 4 main complexes of the mother that a daughter will have. For men, there's about 2. One is usually more common than the other. And but for the daughter, she's either going to have the complex of the mother where she over-identifies with her, or there's one where she completely rejects her. And then there's an overdeveloped mother complex, the eros. That's the daughter who had to compete with her mother for the attention, love, and affection of the father. And then there's the one where she rejects everything she does is an antithesis to her mother. It's the rebellion, the mother complex of the rebel daughter. So, which is similar to the rejection of the mother. However, the complex of, I'll start from the beginning. So the complex of the mother, where the daughter experiences an over-identification with the mother, the daughter then grows to, she rejects herself and abandons herself in order to be like her mother, while believing she's never going to live up to her. She's never going to be that good. She's never going to be that good of a mother. She'll never be that good of a wife. She'll never be that good of a community, caretaker of the community, a caretaker of the land or the home. And her life is spent trying to be that, or be better than that, or as good as that, while sabotaging herself. That daughter with that complex tends to end up in relationships that are not very collaborative of each other. She is more servient to the husband and to the family, whereas the daughter, the complex of the mother, where she rejects the mother, that's the daughter who wants to be the mother, wants to be the wife, but everything she does is because she doesn't want to be like her mother. And the heroine's journey will be seen as her being more of a masculine woman who emasculates her husband, who does not have much of a sex drive, but her drive to have that intimacy is to reproduce, to create, to have children. And she will be battled, facing that inner battle between two sides for a long time until she reconciles with it, of, the balancing of both of those energies. And the complex of the mother, where the daughter had to compete for love and affection with the father. A lot of times too, this is daughters of mothers who had more of an obsessive love with the father, or just over erotic love, or too much attention on the father and not a good balance with the children. Or it could be a mother who was divorced and had many relationships with men, and the mother was more so chasing the attention of the men and neglected the child, the daughter. So that daughter with that mother complex, will often be seen growing up and cycling through a lot of abusive, toxic, neurotic, obsessive type relationships. And one key archetype we see come out of this mother complex is the daughter who becomes the Jezebel. She is the woman who is turned on, attracted to men who are attached. Because if they have a girlfriend or a wife, that to her represents the mother she competed with for their love and attention. And you'll see that play out. You see it in movies, you see it in media, stories and fairy tales all the time. It doesn't make that woman a bad person. This is literally a living, breathing complex of the mother. And she's trying to reconcile that by projecting her mother onto the woman who is married to or attached to the man she's fighting for affections for. And a lot of times her interest in that man is lost when he leaves the woman. She won. So now there's nothing to compete for anymore. The final complex of the mother that a woman may face in this healing the mother-daughter split is similar to the second, entirely rejecting the mother. But this woman is entirely rejecting the archetype of the mother, her mother, and the mother in herself completely. This is a woman she's independent, huge, successful career. She doesn't need men. She doesn't need children. There's no desire for that. Her career is her child. Her friends are the things that the relationships that she nurtures. Generally, she will also marry someone that can be more of a beta male. And that can show up as the boss babe. The career-minded woman. Again, nothing wrong with that. Absolutely not. My sister is the epitome of that. She is awesome. And, but even that heroine who is living an embodiment of that mother complex, she still has to face that mother-daughter split. She's still going to have to reconcile. It doesn't mean that she can't be the boss babe. Doesn't mean that she has to be more feminine and start wearing dresses and doing feminine things, it means she has to reconcile that within herself rather than looking outward as men are the problem, got to stick it to men, men are toxic. That's what she has to reconcile, is that within herself. And that is healing the mother-daughter split. Similar to with, the hero who has to atone to his relationship to power and success. That's the father archetype, that masculine archetype of power and authority. So Jen, based on those mother complexes, which one do you think you identify closest to?
The second to last and the last. I would say I'm a good combination of the Jezebel and the yeah. I mean, from what you were just explaining, I feel like I think that's probably pretty common too, where you're a combination. Like it's not just cut straight that you're this or that with
Right.
the complexes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do have a hard time really kind of understanding that. I guess that's part of myself. I just don't still really understand. Is that because I never really had a great relation. I don't remember my childhood very much. Very little of my childhood do I remember. I had very little relationship with my father till I was later on in life, and then he died. And I still struggle very much with my relationship with my mom. So I see myself in all of them, but I think those two are the ones that kind of stand out for me.
Yeah, and you're right to touch on that point too, is that there isn't a cut and dry, you're either this or that. Some may have the first mother complex, which is this over-identification with the mother until she just goes through one or two spirals of this journey and realizes like this is ridiculous, right? And then she may move more into that second complex of, all right, I identify with the mother, but the way I'm going to be is anything but like what my mother is. Maybe that's just easier. And so you can move between and even have some little gray areas in there. And for you, like identifying with that third, sort of that Jezebel, is very indicative of someone who didn't really have a father in their life consistently that was, a directing authoritative force that offered guidance and love and compassion. So absent of that, of course, as you become a woman, you're looking for that in the world. And without any steady influence in your life prior to that of what a healthy one would look like, yeah, it's a sense of empowerment to choose that yourself and to chase and obtain and dance in those types of relationships yourself. You are the authority. And while also, having that, bit of flavored aspect of that fourth mother complex of, complete rejection. And so, yeah, you can have a little bit of both. There can be some gray areas. And so, Zach, when it comes to that atonement with your own authority and power, that's reconnecting to the masculine, sort of like in the same timeline with the feminine, or the heroine's journey is reconnecting with the feminine. When you reconnect with the masculine, a lot of times that will be instigated or initiated by relationships. Again, during the road of trials, when you meet the goddess or you're in a serious relationship, you're going to start seeing that mother complex mirrored to you by who you choose as a female partner in a relationship. And what those two, we talked about this too. We have a whole other video of this on, right, Jen, where we talked about the feminine masculine dynamics in relationships and how we project onto the other, the unembodied part of ourselves. And
Right.
for that, those are the two dualities. Those are the two complexes of the mother. And the reason we don't have complexes of the father is man or woman, male, female, we come from the mother. Our mother is the origin that and how she moves through the world and in her relationships, even though your father has a huge impact on your life, great influence on your psychic development for sure. We are always and will always be tied to the mother and how she relates to men or the father. And so, regardless, Zach, or any man out there, regardless of how your father is super masculine, maybe a little bit masculine, maybe they were abusive, alcoholic, toxic, absent, successful, kind, compassionate, whatever they were, it was in part a dance with the mother and their relationship and how those feminine and masculine energies coexisted and moved together. And so, whether there's father there or not, or what type of energy the father brought, the mother is always there and present. Now, the nuance is people who didn't have mothers, and that's very different. But the child, the son and the daughter, will be tied psychically to the mother and how she moves through those relationships. And so it is either she is the submissive one or she is the dominant one. And in your relationship, Zach, what was your mother? Was she like trad wife or?
I think she was probably more the submissive side, I'd say.
Mhm.
She wasn't necessarily trad wife. I mean, both my parents had, pretty high paying careers. But in terms of,
In the home?
yeah, in terms of in the home, I'd say, yeah, I'd say she was more the submissive one, but again, it's never cut and dry like that.
Hmm.
She was usually the kind of softer, more flowy kind of person. My dad was more relaxed in some ways, and she was more organized in different ways. But if they got together on something, and my dad was had his ducks in a row and his argument was sound, she would usually wouldn't fight him on that. She wouldn't try to make things different or whatever. She would usually go along with what he had to say, as willing, given that what he had to say was backed by reality and not like some random idea. But yeah, I'd say she was more the submissive
But it
style.
sounds like she was balanced. She presented and embodied more of the mother archetype, more of the feminine side, but also she had that masculine side of a great career and also had a voice. Um, so when early in you and Lainey's relationship, would you say some of the conflict you faced with her was her presenting? Was there a conflict that you ever experienced within yourself of, why can't Lainey just let it go or listen or take my advice
I'm
or
a
why does she always have to have an opinion?
um,
I'm just guessing. I'm just
yeah,
throwing.
no. I'm laughing because I can think of probably examples for all of those things. But
And that is your complex of the mother.
yeah, and I'd say the probably number one overarching thing is um, that I've noticed as a pattern is has basically been. God, I'm trying to put this into good words, but balancing out the work that we have to do together.
Mhm.
So, I have my responsibilities. She has hers. I have my stuff I need to work on. She has hers. Uh, Probably the biggest thing I've noticed is when she gets overwhelmed with things that are going on with her. My response to that has kind of been the I would say like the biggest point of contention. I don't even know if that's the right word, but probably the biggest pattern that I've noticed. Whereas initially it was kind of like I didn't know what to do. Honestly, I had no idea how to like handle it. I mean, I thought I did, but compared to now, I was not even close. But it's kind of like as I've gotten older, I've started to see her, she's going through her own heroine's journey, and I'm going over here on the hero's journey, and I'm looking at her and I'm going, why isn't it, why isn't it what I think it's supposed to be, in a sense, or like, why isn't it not lined up with what's in my brain should be happening? And that's been a learning lesson for me, and how to listen and, kind of be a little bit more receptive and to what she needs, and being able to support her in that. Um, and hers has been mainly like listening to herself and not trying to, do everything all at once. And, it's that constant return back to, it's like disconnecting from the feminine and then learning, oh, I lost myself again. Okay, here I am, I'm back. And so that ends up being a lot of the, like if we ever have an argument or anything like that, that usually ends up being the conclusion of the argument, or like the reconciliation is, I need to pay more attention to what you need. And hers is, I wasn't paying attention to what I need, and I wasn't explaining it clearly, kind of thing. So I don't know, it's a very vague, kind of broad way of putting it, but
Yeah, we're, using polarity dynamics in our relationships for growth. Again, that is marked in the hero's journey, is when the hero falls in love, and then the relationships with a woman or women are going to reflect those parts of his inner polarities that need to be reconciled. It's the same thing for women. And becoming a mother is not always the hallmark of healing, reconnecting with the feminine, nor healing the mother-daughter split. A lot of women don't have children. So that isn't it's a significant hallmark. But for women who don't have children, or are on their own heroine's journey, who have not had children yet, a lot of that will show up when you are in relationship with another person, and how these certain archetypal patterns and complexes of the mother will show up in the tensions that are experienced in the relationship. And so it's the anima and the animus, and these are the energies within. And when we consciously integrate these rather than over-identify, we can start to break it down within ourselves. And so, the feminine can be very receptive. So early on in your relationship, when you were, embodying sort of that masculine archetype of, being more sound or grounding or guiding, and she was not very receptive, it was almost like that's the antithesis of what my mother was. Because when my mother or my father, generated or presented a good argument, she was like agreeable to that. So why isn't Lainey being agreeable to this? And so then it becomes projected as like, what the fuck is wrong with Lainey? What are her issues? Where really she's reflecting onto you that complex of the mother that is yet to be reconciled within yourself. And it's not to say that your mother was not a good woman, or didn't have embodied feminine wisdom, or was a bad wife, or any of those things. It's just there are pieces that you collected and inherited as your own development that then became glued into every fiber of your being, without making room to open the possibility of maybe there is more that we can build on from this complex of the mother. That maybe this is my own internal thing that I am projecting onto Lainey, that she should be more receptive. She should be more relational with me, and go with the flow. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, calm down. You're a little overwhelmed. Like, go with the flow. And why isn't that working when I say that to her? It's like, I told her to calm down. What do you want me to do? and meanwhile, her response to that is her mother complex, also in relation to you, projecting onto you her own unembodied masculine self, as well as the feminine. And again, if you guys go through our videos and you look at the, exploring the relationship dynamics of the feminine and masculine, then we have a whole hour plus on that, and it's very interesting. But the reason it is relative to the hero's journey is, and specifically the heroine's journey as we're discussing, is that those dynamics are what we will confront internally through external measures, experiences, and relationships. And those are a call for us to wholeness. And it's very similar to that in which, when we're reconnecting with the feminine, healing the mother-daughter split, we then will come into that and we'll feel that the pendulum has swung pretty far in one way. And there may be a state of elation and this new self and this embodied femininity. I am back in touch with my intuition. Then things will start to come up that will test, okay, well, what about the masculine self? Maybe you over-identified with the masculine and now you have reconnected with the feminine and you're healing that and you're embodying that. But that doesn't mean you have to completely reject the masculine in order to be feminine, in order to embody your feminine. And so that's why that gateway from healing the mother-daughter split to the gateway of healing the masculine is very natural in each spiral journey of the heroine, because there is sometimes, especially initially, that sort of that impulse or this disillusionment of instinct that now that I've embodied this new part of my feminine spirit that I once abandoned, it may overswing this way and have a rejection of the masculine that's going to show up in your life. It's going to show up as like, at what point does the passivity, over-identifying with your intuition rather than your logic and reason, being more relational instead of goal-oriented, being more emotional rather than rational, stepping into your being more and more rather than also kind of like letting go of the doing. At some point, the woman has to reconcile that too by saying it's the embodiment of the feminine is not the rejection of the masculine. And so how can I continue to authentically embody this feminine spirit, this part of myself, in balance to that true and authentic masculine part of myself? What is it about the masculine I am afraid of? Am I afraid of being, too structured and going back into anxiety and having to get on medications for anxiety? What am I afraid of with the masculine, and how can I embody that too in balance? And then once she passes that gateway, it's all about the union, just living in her world, which she as the feminine is the creator of, integrated with her embodied feminine and masculine, which is similar to the hero. Whereas though the hero has conquered and achieved, he has now achieved this self-actualization, and the return home can be pretty scary. It can be met with a little bit of fear for the heroine too. But when the heroine completes her journey to the point where it's healing the masculine and then integration of the both, feminine and masculine, it's an exhilarating part of her life. There is excitement to it. There is flow, balance, harmony. Whereas when the hero is going to come home, there's sort of like a resistance to that. There's a fear around it. It's, as I've shared with you, Zach, it's like the soldier that goes to war. How do I go home to this ordinary, normal world? And how can I just be normal after what I've been through, what I've saw, what I've suffered, what I've achieved? Like, there's nothing normal about me anymore. So the hero may resist or fear going home, because there's nothing ordinary about his world, but home is that ordinary world. Whereas the heroine is pretty excited to do it and is ready, right? Like, she has reclaimed herself. Whereas the hero now has to introduce everyone to his new self and still does not yet know how that will be received. So that's sort of like the wrap up of it. Do you have any, Zach, sort of like anything you want to emphasize on, or insights you want to add?
Um, Off the top of my head, nothing other than, that if you're listening to this and you're following the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, um, you know that it's all very unique, and to you, and that every step along the way you can look at your life and match it up to something. Like it may not look the same. Your mom and your sister, brother, dad, whatever, they may not have the same paths as you, but if you look at their lives, you can have similarities in terms of the steps. And using these, like if you look at, just focus on your own life and look at where you've been and where you're going, and you can start to fill in some of the blanks for each of these steps and go, holy crap, I've been on this the whole time. I haven't even really been aware of it. But yeah, it's really nice to plug some of this information in and see, okay, where am I at, and how am I creating more awareness of my life that I can use practically with these steps. And I think you laid them out really well in this video. And I mean, I just sat there and listened most of the time. And it was yeah, I learned a lot. It was really interesting to hear um, just the differences: hero's journey, heroine's journey. And while you're speaking and going through all these different steps, I'm starting to see, uh, at least from the heroine's journey, how that's playing out in Lainey's life, or how that has played out in women's life that that I know. And then getting into some of the hero's journey stuff, I'm starting to reflect back and go, oh, okay, like it's a little bit of a little bit of a refresher. I'm starting to see some things with different eyes now, because I haven't thought about the hero's journey in a little while. I haven't done that much reflection on it in a while. But um, yeah, yeah, yeah. So if this is the first time you've ever heard this stuff, this is a good opportunity to learn more, and learn about this process and see how it relates to you, and then um, just grow yourself, get better.
Yeah, and sort of, in current times, and a lot of the culture wars that we are witnessing and sort of observing out in the world right now, now is a really good time to look at this kind of stuff. Um, you know, when life starts to collapse in any crisis, small or big, we are confronted with some kind of an initiation. And when we see the world outside collapsing in different ways, and the crises that are showing up, there's it is interesting to see sort of where things are shifting and how perspectives are shifting. Sometimes they're shifting above us, sometimes they're shifting right underneath our feet, and we're not aware of it. But what we can all agree on is that, if we were to analyze all of the cultural wars going on, through the lens of Jungian theory, we would be able to see every social, culture, political issue as some kind of movement that is speaking to a genuine collective wound. And that wound will always be traced back to this longing to heal the fracture between the masculine and feminine within oneself, the integration of the opposites. And that's why the heroine's journey is so important to understand. Again, not just for women, especially for women, but anyone who works with women and is in a relationship with women, because the cultural shifts that we're seeing out there, and a lot of the cultural wars that are going on in our world right now, are indicative of these fractures within our own selves, as well as the collective psyche. And humanity is standing at this threshold, and we can either honor that sacred polarity that has always guided our evolution throughout all of history, or we can attempt to transcend prematurely our own nature, and that risks profound, alienation from our own souls, our own individuation, our own heroine's journey, and our own hero's journey, which is all about self-actualization and reclaiming who we are. And so if we can recognize the wounds of the collective through all of the wars that are going on culturally, socially, politically, and literal wars, it's important that rather than judge, we look within. And if you're interested in that kind of work, the heroine's journey is something that will be extremely fruitful for you to embark on. And along the way, we will touch on the hero's journey. We'll continue to do that. But if you're more interested in focusing only on the hero's journey, get into BodhiBuilding, take the course Creating Change. It's all about defining your own life's myth and self-discovery through the hero's journey. It is spelled out, laid out. There's guides, instructions, worksheets, everything. You can do it on your own. But following today and through the next several weeks, we're going to, do these videos on Fridays, walking you through each gateway of the heroine's journey. And next week, we'll talk about gateways 1 and 2. We might dive in a little bit to number 3, but it's the separation of the feminine and identification with the masculine, and how we can see that not only in just case studies of ourselves or other women or clients, but collectively, socially in the world as we know it. Jen used images of Frida Kahlo in the newsletter, which she would be a great study of the heroine's journey. I mean, each gateway of the feminine's or of the heroine's journey, if you look at Frida Kahlo's life biography, it's almost like the heroine's journey was written following Frida Kahlo. She hits every target exactly the way you would imagine the heroine journey would. And so, yeah, so stick around for next week. If you're not subscribed to our newsletters, the link is below. You can subscribe to the newsletters. Next week, you'll sort of get a pre-prompt of what we're covering next week in live of gateways 1, 2, maybe 3 of the heroine's journey. And that's sort of like a summary of what we're going to talk about and dig into. And so we've got all the links below for that. Last, I want to touch on, it's really important to appreciate the role of shadow work through the heroine's journey. It's the theme of it. Whereas the hero is external, he is challenged, he is going on an adventure, and the things that he's conquering are outside of him. The heroine is conquering what is inside of herself. She is confronting it and reconciling with it. And the role of this is deep, deep shadow work. So if you're interested in shadow work, again, stay tuned and follow us through this journey. And at the end of it all, we will do a webinar series on the heroine's journey that will be limited to how many seats can participate. But we'll announce that later on down the road. And if you're interested in more, meet us over on BodhiBuilding, and we can talk more on there. And we have office hours every Monday for live Q&As. It's sort of the main feature of BodhiBuilding, but there's so much more there. So go check it out, and we will see you next week.